Hi, Facebook friends.
Hello, everybody. It's Jeff Jenkins and Eric Clayman again for our weekly Facebook Live presentation. Today, we're going to be talking about what to do if you've got an elderly relative who has debt problems. And we wanted to start off, well, I think Eric wanted to make a couple of introductory remarks.
Jeff and I have been doing this for several months now, and we've gotten into this COVID kind of talks all the time. And in fact, we talked about the news from last night and from this morning. Jeff, the fact that December 26th, the federal unemployment, which is an add-on helping people in the gig economy, such as DoorDash or Uber, those people are no longer getting federal unemployment.
Right.
We also talked about the fact that COVID cases are rising very, very quickly. And our friends who work in the casinos and in restaurants might face the same things they faced in April again, or late March, which is such a shame. But today's talk is a talk we could do all the time. This is what we've done for 30 years, is help people who have financial problems. And one of the issues that people have, Jeff, as you know, is the difficulty to talk to people about your financial difficulty, or how difficult it is to talk to someone who you know is having financial difficulty. And hopefully today we're going to give a little insight into how to handle that.
Right. Yeah, it can be difficult, certainly because Eric and I have been doing this for more than 30 years. We've had people come to us, doctors, lawyers. I've had college classmates call me and talk to me about, should I file a bankruptcy? Dentists, chiropractors, et cetera, and it's hard, and it's certainly difficult if you get some family member, your parents, for example, or an aunt or uncle, or I've had family members call me who are having problems, and it's they don't want to talk about it, but they do. And they made a decision to at least try to do that, by talking to us and seeing if there's something that we could do. So if you have an elderly relative and they're having financial problems, generally there's 4 things that you could do to take care of those problems. In fact, it's the same 4 things you could do for anybody who has financial problems. So, number 1, if they've got the money or could get it somewhere, and we're going to talk, maybe we should do 1 and talk about it a little bit, then 2 and talk about it a little bit.
Okay, let's do it that way.
So, or let me go through all 4 and then we'll go back.
Let's do it that way.
So, if you have the money or can get the money someplace, then you can pay off whatever you owe, and that takes care of your problem. Another thing to do would be to, choice number 2, it's not the peace sign. You could make a deal with the people you owe money to and hopefully get out of your financial difficulties that way. That would be another option. A third option that we don't see very often is to do nothing. And actually, that's an option that you really need to take a close look at if you have an elderly person, and we'll talk about that. And lastly, if the first 3 don't work, you can file a bankruptcy. And we're not saying this to go through and paint you into a bankruptcy corner or do that to anybody. We're just saying that in our way of thinking, those are the 4 possibilities. And so let's take them one at a time. And then after we're finished talking about that, we're going to talk about some common questions you might have about this sort of situation, and maybe we could offer some pointers. So the first possibility that we posited was to pay everything off. Now, it could be that your relative or whatever has money in a bank account. They might be willing to take money out of a pension plan and pay their debts. It's possible they've got a lot of equity in their home and they could get a second mortgage, or a mortgage period. The property may be unencumbered. With elderly people, we also think about a reverse mortgage sometimes. Right, Eric? I mean, that's certainly a possibility.
Yes, it is. Of course, what we talk about is based upon our experience and what works and doesn't work. And Jeff, as you know, so many people run up credit cards. They have no choice. There's an illness, there's less income, whatever. Especially for an elderly person, there is no right age to file bankruptcy. So we deal with people from 22 to 92. But what you don't want to see happen is people with a lot of credit card debt taking money out of their pension to pay it off, and then running up the credit card debt again.
Right.
Because that's so you have to be very careful on this method. Number one, paying it off. Also, on a reverse mortgage, and this we see too often, you have to counsel the person to make sure they know that even though the mortgage is not payable, you have to resume payments on real estate taxes, something they may not have paid in the past because it may have been incorporated into a first mortgage.
Right.
Real estate taxes and homeowners insurance, and it can blow up exponentially. So this is why when we talk about how, and we'll get to this later, how difficult it is to talk to people about this, there's a lot of issues, and not everybody is equipped to speak to an elderly relative about these type issues. Not only are they uncomfortable, but they can be technical at times as well. But you're right, Jeff, that's number one. Let's talk a little bit about number two, which is negotiating a settlement with the creditor, maybe for less than what's owed.
Yeah. And just before we jump into that, just an add-on to number one, and Eric and I say this all the time, but we feel that it's absolutely very important. If you're having problems like this, why not talk to a professional? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Go see a bankruptcy attorney or go see your accountant. But I think a bankruptcy attorney would be the best thing if you're trying to look at dealing with debt, because like Eric said, you don't want to make the mistake in pursuing course number one of taking out a mortgage on your house to pay off $30,000 in credit card debt that you might have been able to get rid of, or at least if you talk to the attorney, then you'll know that you could get rid of that money and not have to pay it. So back to number two, trying to make a deal with creditors. It's not a bad idea.
In theory.
Unfortunately, a lot of the creditors are not going to be interested in taking $25 a month for the rest of your life. What they're looking for generally would be a lump sum payment. So let's say you owe them $10,000. Maybe they're going to take $5,000 and call the rest of it, forgive the rest of it, put it that way. One of the issues that you would face in a situation like that is, and they're not going to tell you this, but the IRS sees forgiveness of debt the same as realization of income. So if you try to make any deal like that with your creditors and they agree, perhaps according to the example that I just gave, $10,000, pay $5,000 and you're finished. Well, they're going to file a 1099 with the IRS that says that they forgave $5,000 in debt, because that's what they did. And the IRS is going to see that as a taxable event. In other words, you're going to get taxed on that forgiven $5,000, just as if you made $5,000. You'll have to pay state and federal income taxes on that money.
Remarkable.
And that's for that one creditor. If you've got a lot of creditors, then it's going to be multiplied. But that's something that you can't forget about. The other thing or another problem with following that course is, how many creditors does your elderly relative have? Do they have one? Probably not. 5, 10? Let's say you've got 10 creditors to deal with. Well, what if you can make a deal with half of them and the other half you can't? Where does that get you?
I'll tell you where it got you. You spent a great deal of time, and what did you accomplish?
Well, you made a deal with half your creditors.
I guess.
But it's the thing is, there's problems with that
Very time
course of
consuming.
action, and it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to be frustrating, and some creditors might, like I said, might just say no, we're not going to make a deal with you, and turn it over to their attorneys. You're going to get sued. You'll have to be dealing with that. So that's our course number 2. The third option that we talked about was doing nothing.
Now, doing nothing is a decision.
Mhm.
In other words,
They're all decisions.
they're all decisions, but sometimes we forget that doing nothing is a decision. When you receive your cell phone bill and you decide not to pay it, that's a decision.
Mhm.
And the cell phone company makes its decision accordingly. But
Right.
doing nothing is a decision. No, sometimes it can actually be a good strategy when dealing with elderly people. And this is why. Both in New Jersey and federal law, particularly federal law, specifies that Social Security earnings are not subject to collection actions. And if money traced from Social Security is not subject to collection actions. So that if your elderly relative only has Social Security income, then a creditor, and in New Jersey, you can garnish wages, but a creditor can garnish your wages, take money from your paycheck, but you cannot take money from the Social Security check if you're a creditor. And secondly, in New Jersey, creditors who get a judgment can get the money right from your bank account. In fact, I have a phone call from a woman today at 4:00 to discuss that, which is next hour. You can take money right from your bank account, but they can't take that money if it's Social Security money. So if your elderly relative has no real assets but Social Security, sometimes the best advice is to do nothing.
Right. One thing to keep in mind, while the normal creditors that we think about can't take Social Security, if that's what comprises your bank account, that's the only thing that goes in there is your Social Security money. The bank won't let them take money out of your account, but the law says they can't either. Nor is there any way that they could garnish your Social Security. If you owe the IRS, if you owe the federal government money, they can take your Social Security. And we would see that commonly with income taxes or student loans. That would be the big one. So they're not prohibited from taking money. And today, in today's times, we see a lot of people, even in the baby boomer generation, that owe a huge amount of money on student loans that they co-sign for their children.
Right.
And I just saw that in the paper, and I can't remember exactly what the number was. I mean, there's more than $1 trillion owed in student loans throughout the country. I think it's like $1.5 trillion or something. And the good chunk of that is, in addition to the people who actually went to school, is owed by their elderly parents as co-signers. So those are all things to watch out for.
So the fourth option, Jeff, is to call us, really.
That's right.
And we really talk about calling an expert, a consultant. That's what we are. We're here to consult with you. And Jeff, we got calls like this from people who have tried 1, 2, 3 is inappropriate, and then they call us, right?
Yeah.
And what do we do? We help. We offer possible solutions.
We talk to them, and it's not at all uncommon for us to have a son bring in his father who's elderly and owes a lot of money, and let between him and the father they talk about what the situation is, so we can understand, and then we can give them advice about what we think is the best thing to do.
Right.
And that makes a lot of sense because, I mean, that's what we do. For 30 years, this is what we've done. And it makes a whole lot of sense if you're having problems like this to go see an expert, see somebody who deals with this kind of thing day after day after day.
Right. We have clients who come and see us after a failed bankruptcy. Often they've gone to an attorney who files 1 or 2 bankruptcies, goes to municipal court, does a real estate closing, and then hands a personal injury case. And those bankruptcy cases often don't work out well. you should always consult with an experienced bankruptcy attorney who's part of a firm, so that if something happens to this one lawyer, there's other lawyers there to help you. There's a vacation or something worse, especially nowadays. They expanded, Jeff, all the NFL rosters, didn't they? Because they realized that they need duplications in their professionals. And I feel like we have duplications in our professionals here too, just in case someone goes away for a little bit.
Right.
So,
right.
But Jeff, we talked about all those four. These are the four, and we went over them well. But then people have questions, and we've scoured the internet for questions that people have. And I'm going to take the first one, okay?
Okay.
Because we've kind of talked about it, so it'll be easy. Then you can take the next one.
I wrote your name by it.
And you can take the next one because it's harder. But the question is, what is the best way to approach the conversation with your mother or father or another elderly relative if they are defensive about the issue? And that is so common, and it's uncomfortable on both sides. The elderly parent may be open or may not be open to talking to their child about their finances. And the child who's looked up to their parents for so long may not feel comfortable talking to their parent, but it has to be done. Who else but the child should the parent go to it first? Besides us, I guess. But if you're in the position that you're helping someone, your mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, uncle, aunt, or a neighbor who's in financial problems, it can be difficult. So what we recommend, Jeff, is call us first. Have us speak either probably over the telephone in these COVID days, over the phone, through Zoom, through Google Duo, or even in person with masked up if they want. And we can talk to you about the appropriateness of a bankruptcy filing. It's hard to talk about bankruptcy, but that's what we do. And we have a staff of paralegals, Michelle, Robert, Stephen, and Gregory, who are waiting for your call. And they know that today we're talking about how to help the elderly who have financial problems. And we're here to take your call. But that's it. But Jeff, I'm going to read question 2 to you, and you're going to have to do the answer. Okay. I've got the easy part.
Yeah.
Jeff, how can I find out just how bad my parents' debt is when I don't have access to their accounts?
Well, I think certainly if you're going to help your parents, there's going to be some cooperation on their side, or there needs to be. I don't know if there's any way you can really help your parents if they're not going to accept your help. If they're going to say, I'm not going to tell you what my financial situation is, it's just not good, but they're going to need to help you. And for purposes of a consultation with us, for example, we don't need their accounts. We don't need to know what they owe to the penny. It's right. Just generally what's going on. And so we don't need to get real scientific. As long as you know basically what's going on, your relative knows, or or between the two of you, coming in and talking to us and just giving us some rough figures will enable us to make a good decision and explain things to you. So the next question that we see people commonly ask, are there options for negotiating debt if a lien's been filed against my parents' property?
Jeff, we've talked about this on many episodes. If there's a lien under New Jersey law, there's either a lien, which is a mortgage, and I don't believe that's what they're talking about. So they're talking about a lien by judgment. That means that there's been a summons and complaint filed, and either you lost in court or more likely you made a decision not to respond. One thing that Jeff and I have emphasized, one of the many things during the course of our Facebook presentations, is if you or someone receives a summons and complaint, you're a defendant, you've been sued, you must see a lawyer right away or you will lose your certain rights. And that's what happened here in this hypothetical. If someone has a lien against the property, that means they've been served with a summons and complaint, and there's a judgment that's now a lien. So the question was, are there options for negotiating the debt? Well, sure there are. And one option may very well be file bankruptcy, and you may very well not have to pay the debt back at all, which is the first place of all options, is not paying it back at all. Right. So if you know someone who has a non-consensual lien, they should speak to a lawyer right away, but they should speak to a lawyer earlier once they receive a summons and complaint. Jeff, here's a tough one.
Okay.
What should I do if a debt is tax related? Do we need to consult with a tax attorney, a CPA, a bankruptcy lawyer?
Well, I would say, and Eric and I did talk about these things, so
We prep.
we prepped a little bit. I would still advise going to see a bankruptcy attorney first. Eric and I are both certified by the accountancy boards in New Jersey and Pennsylvania as qualified instructors for accountants. And if we teach a class and accountants attend the class, they can get continuing education credits.
Right.
Taxes and bankruptcy is a very complicated topic, and it's got a lot of nuances to it. And an accountant is not necessarily going to understand all the ins and outs of bankruptcy and taxes. They're going to understand, certainly, or hopefully, about an offer in compromise with the IRS or some type of payment plan or whatever. But they're not going to understand completely how a bankruptcy would apply to a tax liability. So you should really see a bankruptcy attorney, because there's some taxes that we can actually get rid of. Income taxes that are generally more than 3 years old.
If they've been filed for 2 years. Always a 3 and 2 rule, right?
Yeah, if they've been filed for at least 2 years before the bankruptcy is filed and they're at least 3 years old, then we can get rid of them. And accountants don't always understand that. And there's a lot more. I mean, there's rules about trust fund taxes, like if you didn't pay withholding taxes for employees, or sales and use tax, and so on and so on. But you're really best served, I think, by seeing a bankruptcy attorney to talk about tax debt.
Right. And of course, situations differ. If you have $50,000 in credit card debt and $20,000 in tax debt, certainly you should speak to a bankruptcy attorney, because the CPA is going to be myopic and dealing with the $20,000 in tax debt. And we can work on a plan to get rid of all of it, right?
Right.
On the other hand, if you have $100,000 to the IRS and you have $3,000 in credit card debt, maybe starting, where you're going to start. Still talking to us, though, based on what Jeff said. Actually, I'm rethinking as I'm speaking out loud. You can still talk to us, especially if the debt is qualifies under that 3 and 2 rule.
Right. Very good. I know. So our next question, can debt be passed on to children? Should I be worried about having to pay my parents' debts?
Well, a debt, I hope debts can be passed on to children, because I have 2 of them and I wouldn't mind them having to pay my debts. Debts do not pass to children unless, of course, you as the child co-signed on a car loan. We see that sometimes. It's interesting how life changes. At first, the parent co-signs for the child, but then there does become a time when the children might co-sign for the parent. So if you're on the debt, it can pass to you. Or if the debt is against property that you are to receive by way of inheritance or other means, then the debt sticks with the property. So we talked about that, a lien, like a car loan or a mortgage loan. If you're supposed to get the car by way of inheritance and it still has a lien, a loan, it passes to you. Otherwise, there is no, it's not like COVID. It doesn't go from 2 people who are real close together.
Right.
You have to sign to be responsible for a debt.
And also, we shouldn't forget that if your parents pass away, or you have a parent that passes away and they have debts that are owed, those debts are going to be liabilities of the estate. And even though you as the child become the administrator of the estate or executor of the estate, that doesn't mean that you owe the money. The estate owes the money.
Right.
So the debt doesn't become yours personally, but it does become the estate's.
Jeff, we're so close. Should we do one more? Or?
I think we're good.
I think we're good. Okay.
So hope everybody enjoyed our program today. We talked a little bit longer than normal, but not much. And we started at a different time today. But and next week, Eric, Thursday is Thanksgiving.
So
That's right.
We're gonna give the people a break, Jeff. Or we're gonna give the people a break.
Yes, we'll give you a vacation next week for Thanksgiving, and then resume the following week on Thursday at 2:00. And hopefully you'll tune in then. And until then, goodbye and God bless.